I'd like to thank you all for coming this evening. This is my beloved guru, Shelly. He's a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, and I'm very delighted that you've all joined us to share in his wisdom. Thank you.
And first, I'll tell you a little bit about Yogananda. Yogananda loved to quote Shakespeare. One of perhaps the nicest quotations that he gave was that we're all on the stage, actors on the stage, doing our part. But we should always remember we were an actor or an actress on the stage of life. And he hammed it up quite a bit. He loved being Yogananda, the guru. He loved being there. And I'll tell you the first way that he would act. In California, in Encinitas, it was kind of warm, 95 degrees in the summertime. He would come from his ashram to the temple, which had 2 lotus buds and 1 lotus blossom, which were in gold leaf. And he had on a bearskin coat, a derby hat, and a cane. And he would walk down the flagstep steps past what looked like the Taj Mahal, very sedately walking like this to the temple. When he got to the temple, there was a disciple waiting to take his cane and his derby hat, and another disciple to take his bearskin coat. When he put his bearskin coat on him, he would go down. It was a real heavy coat. Somebody that he liked quite well had given it to him as a present. And then he'd sedately go into his temple and give whatever type of lecture he would be happening to give. So this was Yogananda, the man, Yogananda the humorist, Yogananda who hammed it up as hard as he possibly could. But there was behind this Yogananda the saint. Now to tell you a true story what actually happened. There was one of his adopted sons there, and it was close to Christmas time. And one of his wanderings through the world, and he was over in the Middle East, he had seen a statue which he admired pretty much from one of the Shahs over there. I forgot the name of the Shah. But this Christmas, the Shah was sending this to Yogananda. Now it had tremendous value in the museum. They figured roughly maybe $100,000 back then, and this was years ago when $100,000 was $100,000. And so he kept calling on the telephone, has it come yet? Has it come yet? No, it hadn't come yet, it hadn't come yet. And he says, now you call me as soon as it comes. And the disciple says, yes, he would. But it didn't matter. Each day he called the disciple anyhow and yelled, has it come yet? Has it come yet? And it was about the day before Christmas when it actually arrived. Well, the disciple and I, we put it into the truck because Yogananda wanted us to come immediately right up there. And the disciple was telling me how he had learned, you know, all these beautiful knots so that things wouldn't come undone. He was real happy that he had been a Boy Scout. And so it was all pushed in and everything else was tied down, all the gifts and other things that were supposed to go up there. Yogananda loved parties and he used to love to produce great feasts. That meant you sat before him for 4 whole hours and you just keep eating. It's undoubtedly why I eventually got this and why Yogananda was big a soul, as they say. So everything was finally ready, and at this time there was sort of a hurricane out in the Pacific Ocean, and the wind was blowing pretty strong. It had blown some of the palm trees down. It even blew a palm tree down in Yogananda's place in Encinitas. And as we were going up, some of the road was awash with water from the Pacific Ocean. So we had to go up and around on the side. And as we were going, about every 5 or 10 minutes, we'd look back to see if everything was all right, and everything going okay. Everything was going all right. Then suddenly we looked back, and behold, the box was gone. So we went back, and we went forth, and we went back, and we went forth. We couldn't even find a splinter of the wood. So this young man who was in charge of this whole thing, he was really getting scared. Well, time was going on. We had to go up, so we continued to go north towards Los Angeles. And the closer we got to Los Angeles, the slower the truck began to go, and the wider he began to look. So finally, when we got to Los Angeles, where Yogananda was, and we got out and we had to go in, Yogananda, like a cherub, comes bouncing towards us. It's come, it's come, it's come, it's come, it's come, you know. And he looked at this young disciple. He says, it has come, hasn't it? And I'm not telling you the disciple's name because I think he's still alive. And he saw the paleness of his face. And so this young disciple says to Yogananda, explained it, looking at me for confirmation. And I nodded. Everything he said was true. And Yogananda looked at him, and a beam came onto his face. And he says, look, that was the thing. You're real. And he put his arms around him. And he says, it's you that I love. And then he went over and he did the same thing to me. Now, as far as I know, he never said anything to this young disciple before. He sure never said anything to me about it. And so that was a lot of money that went down the line. So he was able to live a life. He lived a life and he enjoyed it to the fullest of its extent. He hammed it up at every time and every possibility that he could. But behind the man was always a saint. And so here was the mouth of God. And the mouth of God was where he sat, in constant viewing of Yogananda, the man. And so I considered Yogananda really a saint, a being who was fully aware of his existence as an actor on the stage of life here. And he never really forgot that he was an actor, and he was in control of his emotions. He also was quite arrogant, for when he joined Sri Yugatesharji, and that's the way I pronounced it anyhow, some pronounce it a little bit different, he realized Yogananda, the arrogant person. So he did the best thing you can to a person like that. He made him wash the pots and pans. Yogananda told me that when he first did this, he figured, he must be in the wrong place with the wrong crew. He didn't realize his importance, see? But this was his job, and he continued to do this, and finally he advanced up until he began to cook for the different individuals. He became a gourmet. And in his earliest books, you will notice that he taught you a lesson in spirituality, and then towards the end of the book, he taught you, for instance, like what watermelon was good for, and how to make type of candy out of watermelon rind and things of this sort, and to save the seeds and what the seeds were good for. In other words, he examined all the different things that different foods that you might eat would do for your body, would help you in all different kinds, manners, and ways, which was very, very good for anybody who is interested in cooking and for women in general. And he always brought in very practical applications along with his spirituality. So he showed one thing above all others in his teaching, that in order to reach the purpose of existence, to reach self-realization, to reach God consciousness, a person needed a technique. With a technique, one did not have to believe the technique or disbelieve the technique. You merely had to use it. If you used the technique, you would reach self-realization, you would reach God consciousness. And it was a technique of meditation. Now the technique of meditation was quite simple. And it was what is, according to Yogananda, was a simple mathematical equation. And I know you're not too interested in mathematical equations, but I'm going to give you one anyhow, so that you know what he meant by meditation and the pathway to self-realization, the pathway to God consciousness. And it was this: when you meditate, how many factors are involved? When you meditate upon that cane, the cane is your object of meditation. You are the meditator, and there's the act of meditation. When these three objects, the meditator, the object of meditation, the act of meditation, are equal to one, perfect meditation ensues. And this is the purpose of meditation. This means that now, each and every one of you who are here, you are aware that I am here, you're aware of how I am dressed, you're aware of what the temperature is, you're aware of the people next to you, you're aware of the type of my voice. Maybe you have 20, 30 different things that you're aware of right now. This is nowhere near close to one. And this formula, really, it's the meditator divided by the object of meditation times the act of meditation is equal to 1. And if you have 20 or 30 objects of meditations which you're aware of now, 1/20th is the power of your meditation. And this would be something really good. So what you do when you meditate, you focus your awareness on one thing, and you keep it focused there until the number of objects of meditation are reduced from 20 to 19 to 18 to 15 to 16 to 17, continue to reduce, and your part of your meditation begins to increase and increase until eventually you become close to atonement with the object of your meditation. This produces within your being a deep sense of peace, calmness. They call it the peace that goeth before all understanding. It produces you into a state where you begin to digest the knowledge that you have, and when digested knowledge becomes wisdom. And now you're beginning to move truly on the pathways towards self-realization. When you get down that there's very few things that you're aware of, maybe 5 or 6, a strange thing takes place. You were meditating upon this cane. You find, well, I am more important than this cane. This cane is a thing. And so you find yourself. Self-realization takes place, and an inversion begins to function. The inversion indicates that you are a viewer and you are the viewed, but you don't know which one is which. And in this, the inversion takes place that you become the object of your meditation, and when this happens, it is like the viewer becomes viewed, the beholder becomes beheld, the lover becomes loved. I'm expressing the various chakras associated with the laws of self-conscious awareness, and the feeling is bliss, pure, unadulterated bliss, ever-changing, ever-new, ever more glorious bliss that pours through your whole being. And if you think dope and things of this sort has an avenue, you haven't tasted bliss yet. It is way above and beyond anything that dope can do. All dope can do is lead you into the illusions of the astral world, and you might think you're in a state of bliss. You're in a state of not bliss, but maybe some form of ecstasy. But it's nothing like the peace that goeth before all understanding. It's not the pool which is clear, wherein you can look and see reality as it really is, not as you dream it is. Remember, all of us think we are one thing. We pretend that we're something else to others, and we're really a third. But in the pool of bliss and the calmness of our self-realization, we see reality as it really is. We see us as we really truly are, not as we think we are, not as we pretend to be, but as we really truly are. And in this point, we're moving towards the very purpose of our existence, the very nature of our being. Many have expressed God in many ways. If you move into God consciousness through any form of meditation, and this is what Yogananda has expressed as meditation from what I have described, you find that God is an all-giving, all-loving being. He wants to do nothing but give you everything that he is, everything that he has, and he asks you one thing and one thing only: let him. None of you let him. And people go to church, Catholic church, Protestant church, synagogues. Doesn't matter what the religion is, all paths lead to God consciousness eventually, but most that go to church do this. And in the Catholic church I have heard this pray: "Dear Jesus, give me this." Someone else says, "God, give me that." And I've heard a woman say, "Dear Jesus, give me this. If you don't give it to me, I'll go into the Holy Mother Mary to intercede on my part so that I can have what I want." And you see, they are praying, they're tuning into the gimmies. Now, when you're tuning into channel 13, you can't get it by tuning into channel 8. You can't get God consciousness, you can't get peace, you can't get this bliss, this calmness that solves your problems by tuning into the gimmies. You've got to tune into the givings. God is all-loving, all-giving reality. And so to tune into him, tune into his channel, pray to the cosmic dreamer, the great God, and pray, how can I help you bring about your concept into the world of existence? What can I do to alleviate you from all the problems that everyone is praying to you about? Now you're tuning into the God channel. Now you've got a chance. But so long as you're aware of all your wants and needs and on your own channel, you're really tuning into the devil's channel. And this is his opportunity when you think that you have tremendous needs and wants. And now I'm not saying that the devil won't give the things to you, but he does so at a price. And the price happens to be your soul. And so you want to know, what is your soul? Okay, I'll tell you. You are self-conscious awareness. You are aware that you are. You stand off and view yourself. Any change in a state of self-conscious awareness implies an event has taken place. Every event is a part of the memory track of the spirit, and the memory track of the spirit is the soul, pure and simple. All the soul is a memory track of the spirit. It's part of the spirit. And to express it in mathematics, I'd have to go into transfinite math, where we're dealing with infinities instead of finite things, and that's too much for an audience here, and especially I don't have a blackboard to do it on. This is God, pure and simple bliss, remember. And if you have a problem and you meditate, it eventually will solve all problems because it brings into balance your self-conscious awareness. But there's a time lapse between getting there and the problems of today. So there's many helps, patterns along the way. Part of these patterns is the ability to understand the law of symbolic association. Remember, if you take a child that is about 1 year of age, the child that you can understand, no one else can understand the child because of its youngness, and ask what it dreams. And you will find that it uses the same basic symbols in a dream that the older person uses. Where did it learn it? Now there's some basic symbols which are always the same. They have the same meaning and are universal for really all living things. Up is good, down is bad. You don't have to learn this. This is why heaven is always up and hell is always down. So if you have any kind of a dream whatsoever and you're going up, it indicates a favorable condition. Say you're going up a rickety ladder, and the ladder is a rope ladder, and part of the rope is frayed. It indicates you are advancing, but under precarious conditions. If you're going up a beautiful stairs, you're advancing under very favorable conditions. It doesn't say what the conditions are with just those symbols. It tells you that you are succeeding to move forward in some particular category of life. You have to have some other symbols to tell what it is, whether it's in the partnership, whether it's in health matters, whether it's in finance. It depends upon other symbols to indicate the category. Now, there's many types of sciences to help you learn the laws of symbolic association. Freud was one of the ones who brought it about into an accepted and an accredited college degree for understanding symbolism. Today we have psychiatry, we have psychology, we have astrology, we have the Kabbalah. We have a number of methods whereby we can understand and learn the laws of symbolic association. Perhaps the simplest of all these methods is astrology itself. It has come down to us from the ages as more clearly than any other form of symbolism to tell what our relationship is. It does, in this manner, it tells our relationship to everything that has ever been, everything that will ever be, and everything that we are aware of now. Our relationship to it, the relationship of everything that we're aware of to each other. And to show you this, another example of what had happened with Yogananda in connection with astrology, his secretary, whom he considered his best critic, was a good astrologer. She used to earn her money by writing for astrology magazines and doing astrology. And Yogananda used to say to her, look, you're being enslaved by astrology. You make your decisions. You always drop a horoscope to find out what you should do. She said, but you do everything under the best of aspects. He says, okay, he says, you pick out the worst possible aspect that, and he says, I'll show you I can do and make it work. I don't have to depend upon my horoscope. I don't have to depend upon the fates to have what I want. So while I happened to be there, he happened to have a very, very adverse aspect. And there was a church which he had seen made out of redwood. I'm not sure whether it was out of one redwood tree or not, but he had fallen in love with it. And he wanted to bring it down and put it into Hollywood. He figured Hollywood needed some spirituality for some reason or other. And so in order to do this, of course, he needed money. Now, when you have an organization, there's only one way you can get money, but then Yogananda tried his best, and so he prayed to God, and he says that he was bringing this, you know, to help spread the word of God, and he needed some money to accomplish this. And he says God told him to send flyers out to all of the disciples to gather some money together in order to accomplish this particular purpose. So Yogananda sent out flyers to everybody, and the money came in, and the church was put on, you know, rollers, and the tractor, whatever it was coming down, and Yogananda had smiles on his faces. And then the telegram came. The trailer had broken loose and had gone through a fence and into some farmer's yard, and there it sat. And then there was some legal troubles associated with it, you know, to get it out, because he had to pay for all the damages that was done to the crops, to the fens, and as they say, etc., etc. And so Yogananda needed some more money. So Yogananda, not getting any from his normal sources, once more had to meditate and pray unto God. And he told God what his situation was and what happened and things of that sort, and God said, you have to send another flyer out to the disciples. And he says, oh God, he says, not again. He says, they have contributed so much. He says, not again. God says, yes, you must. So he sent out another flyer. And the money came in, and finally it arrived. And by this time, it was Easter. He had hoped to have it there by Easter and opened up. Well, he just got it in before Easter, and he ran into all little different problems and things of that sort. When he finally had it so that people could go into it, and that it was open for business, his adverse aspect had passed, a good aspect had come along, and so Yogananda said, you see, you can accomplish it, but not without difficulties. So astrology can be used to aid you in the normal everyday purposes of existence. Remember, forearmed is forewarned. And if you know something about the future, you have a chance to do something about it. If you don't know anything about the future, you have absolutely no chance whatsoever to alter the things. If you consider that you have free will, this is what must take place to prove that you have free will. You must have some way of predicting the future with a rather high degree of accuracy, and then you must proceed to change it. If you can do this, you have proved to yourself that you have free will. Now, there's many experiments taken on along this line. The results are not exactly too favorable. If you have free will, it would indicate that your free will existed before you entered into this body, and the body that you entered into, its genetic coding, matched very closely to your karmic destiny patterns. If it didn't, you would enter into the body and you were unable to stay into it, and if you insisted upon staying into it, it would malfunction. You could act as an idiot, as a moron, or something of this sort, because some other physical phenomena would take place, and it would not be a favorable vehicle. So there must be a balance, so that the genetic coding must equal your karma. If you want, in your next incarnation, you can be Cleopatra, or you can be William the Conqueror, or whatever you want. Time, in God's cosmic dream in which we live, is not like you think it is. And this is why you're existing. Remember, from the beginning, the sages have always said, what am I here for? Where am I going? What is the purpose of my existence? What is it all about? And the sages says, man, know thyself is the first step towards understanding of this. And to know yourself, you have to meditate. Meditate, meditate, as Yogananda says, continue to meditate to reach self-realization and God consciousness. And when you finally reach this, you find the world isn't like you think it is. Time is not like you think it is. Space is not like you think it is. This is what happens. You all have a VCR, or most of you do and know what it is anyhow. Supposing you take this tape and you run it out full length until you have it stretched out. There's nothing moving on it, right? But if you pull the head on it and you move along at a steady rate, you can see what's taking place on your TV screen. Well, you've got a head here, and you're moving on the tape of God's memory banks, memory track, so to speak. Where you are at now is an environment which is contiguous onto your own personal nature. In other words, if you have the awareness and the spiritual advancements of a fish, you will be born in the ocean where fishes are. If you have the spiritual advancement of a guinea pig, this is where you will be. You'll be like a guinea pig, or maybe you'll be a serpent, or maybe you'll be pretty close to the top of the chain and be a human being on the face of this earth. And it depends upon your spiritual nature as to where you're going to be. What is your environment, outer and inner environment? In other words, truly, your outer environment is a reflection of your inner environment. And once you have reached that particular point where you incarnate into the type of human being, or some other animal for that matter, that depicts your state of evolutionary spiritual advancement, you will have an outer environment depicting this. And now you have a chance to advance spiritually. For instance, you could have entered maybe at some time into the body of a dog and have a wonderful, glorious spiritual master. Look how fast you would advance in spirituality until maybe the next incarnation you would be a human being. And because you're a human being this time does not necessarily guarantee that you're going to be a human being next time. You could go down the scale a little bit. It's highly improbable, but it is possible. And so it behooves everyone to really try to advance as far as he possibly can in this particular incarnation. So life is really simple, but we make it complex. We make it terribly complex, and it is not complex. For instance, when we go into basic symbolism, here's some basic symbolism of artists. A vertical line is cool blue in color. It's austere, commanding, regal, awake. A horizontal line is soft green in color. It's peace, rest, soothing, sleep, death. At a 45-degree angle to it is a line, and it is red in color, and it's action. It's like Mars. And there's the fourth line, and it is like a wavy line. It modulates the other three. It's called the many coats of color. Because here we have the combination of the three primary colors, red, blue, and green. Now this all only applies when you have a gravity field. If you go into deep space, there are not these three types of lines and colors. Remember, in deep space where there is no gravity, and this is a theoretical point because practically we don't know of a place where there is no gravity. But if we move into the abstract form, we have two types of lines. A straight line, which is white in color and is masculine, and a curved line, which is black in color and is feminine. The most perfect curved line is a circle. But all curved lines indicate energy patterns. This is why nature gave the power to bear children, because a woman is a symbol of power, of energy, and she can therefore have the energy for creation. If they gave the power to man to have children, population would have ceased long ago because they'd had one child and then they would have stopped. But women have the power of enduring this pain and continuing on. And then they have glandular secretions which helps them to love that little prune which is born. So the curved line is a kind of energy. You can always look for it like when you have a watch and you wind up the spring. I know that modern watches have a battery in them, but the early watches have a spring. In the early languages, spring and spirit meant pretty much the same thing because it meant an energy field. You want to know how all this came into existence, how karma originally started, where it all began? It's not too difficult. When you are aware that you are, remember there's 4 factors of self-conscious awareness. Om Sat Tat Om in the Hindu, Yavaha as far as we go of the Hebrews. In other words, even in German, Gott, G-O-T-T. In the English language, it used to be G-O-O-D, but they forgot one of the O's through the time. After all, we forgot some of the meaning of God anyhow, and it meant good. And so we always usually had 4 letters symbolizing the name of God. Remember, we have the 4 factors which indicate it. In meditation, your other factor is the memory bank of the spirit. And so this is a 4 factor. 2 are the same. You're the beholder, there you're the beheld. But we don't know who the beholder is, we don't know who the beheld is. You act as though you're standing off and viewing yourself. And in the very act of doing this is an uncertainty principle. Whom is who? One is feminine, one is masculine. One is a straight line, one is a curved line. The curved line results because we do not know who is the observer, who is the observed, who is the viewer, who is the viewed, who is the meditator, who is the object of meditation, so to speak. And what happens under this condition, and an uncertainty principle, it indicates an energy differential. As soon as there's an energy differential, it's accumulative, it begins to increase, and as it increases, it eventually becomes a circle. The circle begins to shrink, the energy begins to build until we finally have an infinite amount of energy. Just recently, since with the new computers which you have in Great Britain, and Great Britain says now that she has the best computers in the world because she has the fastest computer in the world. That was at least about a month ago. That might have changed by now. And in their computer they have gone back now just before the Big Bang, when there was an infinite amount of energy. And they found out here was an infinite amount of energy, and finally there was enough energy in this infinite amount that they could create anti-gravity. Because in this place where there was an infinite amount of energy, it was all gravity. Gravitons seemed to have an enormous amount of energy to create one. And so momentarily anti-gravity was created, and then the Big Bang took place. So we're a few seconds now before the Big Bang took place. I am saying that we go back into self-conscious awareness, and the very laws of self-conscious awareness causes an infinite amount of energy to be accumulated and will then cause a Big Bang. So that if we're uncontrolled, we will create unbalanced universes, and they will close in upon themselves, and there'll be all kinds of suffering and struggles. To show you how unbalanced you are, this is experiments that have taken place. In the college some years ago, they took a group of 10 average individuals, and they took another group of 10 average individuals to, remember, we must have a comparison. And with the one group of 10 individuals, they wrapped them in burlap. Their hands, their legs, and they put them in a room where there was nothing to view, and about 3 rooms further on there was a candle burning. Now there was nothing to see anyhow. You didn't hear nothing, you didn't feel anything, and they wanted to see how long you could remain rational. Well, when you're in a state like this, you begin to hear your heartbeat, and your mind begins to turn inward for stimuli because there's nothing to stimulate you outside. Within 12 hours, all the students were gloriously raving mad. They had lost their identity, they did not know who they were, and they had to talk them slowly back into existence. And they found out when they were doing this, they could brainwash them. And this is just exactly what Russia needed. They got certain individuals, and since you can do this with a large majority of human beings, someone had committed a crime, they couldn't find out who the criminal was, they'd take anybody at random and brainwash him, and he would confess to the crime and ask the nation, the courts, to exterminate him. You can make them believe anything. You could even change their emotional patterns and all. Now, they could not do this to everybody. To one who meditated, they were unable to accomplish this because he was able to control the inner forces of his nature. Is what this means. You are not very well balanced in your inner nature. You need outside stimuli to keep you in control. In other words, you're in God's cosmic dream that is loaded with stimuli, and all paths in God's cosmic dream points to self-realization, to God consciousness. If you meditate, you begin to control these states of unbalanced forces within your being, these states of unbalanced forces that cause you all the pains and griefs. And by your meditation, you bring that into realization. You bring that into peace. This is why when you have reached balanced self-conscious awareness, it feels as though it is a world full of peace that goeth before all understanding, before all expression. Why shouldn't it be peace? There's no longer any forces to keep you out of balance. To indicate how different vehicles and different forces can upset an individual, and how God consciousness is, there was a devotee in India, and he had cancer on his legs. This is one of the stories that Yogananda would tell. And his disciples, because he had a cane and he was not being able to walk too good because of the cancer which was on his legs, and his disciple says, when you're in God consciousness, if you ask God, He'll cure you of your cancer. Oh, yes, yes, the devotee said. He says, well, when you're in God consciousness in your meditation, ask Him. Oh, I will. He says, I will. And so months go on, and the cancer continues to grow, and he's beginning to get more and more difficult to carry on his walking. And so the disciples again says to this devotee, this Guruji, look, things are getting worse. Ask God, and so that you will be healed. Oh, he says, yes, he says, I will. And months goes on, and he's really getting into a bad condition. He can no longer walk unless he's leaning with help upon his disciples. And they are very concerned now because they're apt to lose this man whom they revere. And he says, why don't you do something? He says, you seem, it's so important. He says, but when I'm in God consciousness, when I'm in balanced self-conscious awareness, he says, it's so peaceful. And he says, I have no problems. I am not aware of any problems. He says, how can I think of something like a physical body under these conditions? This is, but you must. And so he went into God consciousness in his meditations. And as he was beginning to come out, he says, cosmic dreamer, he says, for the sake of my disciples, he says, my cancer here. And when he came out, it was gone. Remember, he said, O cosmic dreamer, the great spirit, for the sake of my disciples, not for selfish love, not for the self part, but for the unselfish love for his disciples. He was tuning into God consciousness, remember. Then the gift could be granted. If you go into meditation for selfishness, you're not tuning in, remember. It must be an unselfish love for someone else to help another being. And the important thing, a ceremony. Remember, the disciples continued to tell him that there was a problem, so that finally the ceremony was intense enough that when he was just moving out of God consciousness, out of a state of balanced bliss, he became aware that there was a problem, so that this bliss of God could function and take place, but only through unselfish love. Remember, if he thought and he wanted to do it because he didn't like the cancer there and it was for a selfish purpose, he wouldn't have been tuning into God, he'd been tuning into gimmies again. And then he'd have been in trouble. So this is what Yogananda loved to quote Shakespeare for. Very, very important to him was that we're all actors on the stage, all playing our part. And remember, whatever part you're playing, play it to the hilt, enjoy it, regardless what it is, and meditate. There are many good books out. You have an excellent guru here to teach you the various techniques and the methods to self-realization, to God consciousness, to self-realization, to solve your problems, and the other sciences of symbolic association to help you on the way for all the different patterns and paths that might be important to you now, so that you might be able to meditate more perfectly, to reach self-realization. But remember, the basic technique is to meditate, never stop meditating. And there's two basic techniques that Yogananda taught. One is called Kriya proper, and the other is called indirect Kriya. It was found out by psychics and mystics through God consciousness around the cerebrospinal system. The closer a person moved towards self-realization to God consciousness, a current would flow. And the farther away that one was, the least the current would flow. Now there was a technique which he taught that caused the current to flow in the manner that psychics saw it. This was called Kriya. Now this is Kriya proper. Indirect Kriya is all other paths lead to self-realization to God consciousness, and this is indirect Kriya. Of all the paths of indirect Kriya, the path which is the strongest is the path wherein someone teaches someone else the path towards self-realization. Remember, no guru can take the path for you. He can show you the way. You have to take it yourself. You have to move towards self-realization. Only through self-discipline can you accomplish it. That's a dirty word, self-discipline. It means no one else can do anything for you but yourself. And you can accomplish it if you want to. And if you didn't want to, you wouldn't be here. And since you are here, it means you can accomplish it. Now, since all paths lead to God consciousness, what is the difference between any two paths? And there's many paths towards God consciousness. In fact, in this cosmic dream, all paths lead to God consciousness. But you can get to San Francisco by going by airplane, by going by train, by going by car. In fact, you can get to San Francisco by going due east. The only difference between any two paths towards self-realization, towards God consciousness, towards bliss, beyond all expression, is the length of time that it takes you to get there and the experiences on the way. Now, Karma Yoga is considered the slowest of all paths towards God consciousness. If you take a human being, deduct from it the time in between incarnations, deduct from it the time that's the interval between sickness, you will reach God consciousness in approximately 10 million years. You will experience just about everything that's on the way. Once our president, what was the name? Eisenhower, he was over in India, and the Saban says that he followed the path of Karma Yoga. And they say now that God must love Karma Yoga above all other yogas, because so many of the people on the face of the earth are following Karma Yoga. Of course, in this way, they flattered our president. But by Kriya Yoga, you can accomplish all this vast time. You can reduce it into one lifetime of self-realization, of balanced self-conscious awareness, of bliss, pure, unadulterated bliss. And so it's important if you want to get there. Now, as they said, and this is what Yogananda quoted, if you go to the desert and you sit and you meditate, now remember, you're doing practically nothing else but meditating, barely surviving by getting enough food and things of this sort. You can accomplish it, and in accomplishing it, you lift every being on the face of the earth up a little bit towards God consciousness. So you have helped everybody by reaching God consciousness. But he says, if you go into Chicago, and I bring that up because this happens to be Chicago where we're at, and he says, and you live close to where there's an elevated, and you go to meditate it, and every time you go to meditate, there's an elevated train going by, and your place shakes and trembles. He says, if you reach God consciousness here, you have created a much greater, he says, achievement, but the probability of you doing so is much, much less. But it can be done if you're sincere and earnest enough. And remember, the way to God consciousness, the way to self-realization, the way to solve your problems is to find a sage someplace to help you along the path. Somebody to help maybe read your chart, read your destiny because of their inner insight. And to help solve your problems, to show the way, to bring you into self-realization, into this place of bliss. Once you have tasted it, you will never lose the path. You will continue on to meditate for the rest of your existence, because balance is uniqueness, not the norm. The norm is a state of unbalance. Remember, in self-conscious awareness, you don't know which one is of you and which one is of you. There is a perpetual state of uncertainty, a state of unbalance that produces energy. But in a state of balanced self-conscious awareness, there is no energy differential. The ancient Egypts, when a person died, they weighed his soul against a feather. If he weighed more than a feather, he had to come back and reincarnate again. Remember, energy is equal to mass. Einstein found this out some thousands of years later, E equal mc squared. So the more energy you had meant the more unbalanced you were. The more unbalanced you were, the greater was your mass. And this is why they weighed a soul on the scale with a feather. They seem to have known these ideas long before we came around in this wonderful age and discovered it. And now, how long have I talked to? I should ask them, let them ask questions?
I don't have a watch.
Oh, I have a watch.
It's 20 after 8.
Discovering what?
Life purpose.
God's purpose?
Life purpose.
Life purpose? I thought that's what I was discussing. in figuring of life's purpose. Truthfully, most of us, we're like a boat in this middle of the ocean. The boat hasn't got a rudder, but that doesn't matter. We don't know where the port is anyhow. So most of us do not know really basically what the purpose is. And the purpose is really balanced self-conscious awareness. It has always been known what the purpose of existence is, so that you bring into balance so that continence beholds continence in balanced self-conscious awareness. In the book of the Kabbalah, the first statement in the Book of Concealed Mystery says the Book of Concealed Mystery is a book of the equilibrium of balance, so that continence beholds continence in balanced equilibrium. This is what the purpose of existence is. This is what all beings do. In fact, when you're out and bodiless and just brilliant states of awareness, they have one game which continues to function. Press the other guy's button, which tells him how much unbalanced he is. There is no other better game than that. They say I am rather good at it myself. And so I really think the cosmic dreamer's got you all down here, and he's really pressing your buttons like nobody's business. And to me, that is what the ancients meant by the purpose of existence and the law of existence.